The child star who rose to fame from the iconic movie E.T. has been in a ton of movies, shows, and even a popular name for the song titles. Of course, we're talking about Drew Barrymore herself, as she began her very own talk show in 2020. However, just like anything, there are mixed opinions on Drew as a host rather than an actress, with many believing she makes some guests uncomfortable. Today, we are going to be discussing 10 times Drew Barrymore made her talk show guests uncomfortable. If you don't know me already, I'm your host Melanie with InformOverload. And before we begin, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get straight into it. And for our number 10, we have Too Close to Oprah. Just recently, Oprah was on the Drew Barrymore Show, but it wasn't what Drew said that caused a lot of people online to share their opinion, but rather what she did. A lot of viewers couldn't help but to notice how many times Drew would touch Oprah, and it wasn't just a little light touching, but Drew actually grips Oprah's chin firmly while she speaks, and another interaction was after Drew was holding on to Oprah's hand. She eventually let go and began caressing her arm. And after the viewers at home watched this episode, they of course shared their opinions, especially under the talk show's Instagram account. One user wrote, "Oprah's body language was so clear, she wanted her hand back." And another commented, "The handhold and the arm being caressed is past my boundaries." But of course, everyone has their own boundaries, and many speculated Oprah was uncomfortable based on what they saw on the show. Another user wrote, "Oprah's body language says it all. Drew is holding on too much. Oprah is trying to release her hand from Drew's grip. Drew is just too creepy and needy." But because so many people were talking about this, Oprah herself actually talked to TMZ and stated, "I was not uncomfortable at all." And even some viewers shared how they loved Drew's more hand-on approach, with one viewer sharing under the talk show's YouTube account writing, "I love the way she's holding Oprah's hand like a security blanket as she seeks confirmation." And it seems like Oprah was a fan of the arm stroking after she actually shared that she felt comforted by it and even joked about with her partner that she needs to be stroked in the arm. And for our number 9, we have Kevin G. In the iconic movie Mean Girls, there was one character many loved, and that was Kevin G. Rajiv Surendra, sorry for the mispronunciation in advance, was a guest on the show, but as soon as he was on stage, it was instantly awkward. This is because in other talk shows, the host often announces a guest before welcoming them on stage. But in this instance with Rajiv, she introduces him and proceeded to open fan mail with him just there. She also does something called zip code of the day, and while she goes on to talk about the city and all the tourist traps, all while he's just sitting there and smiling while clapping when the audience does. It is definitely different than other talk shows because of course hosts do their own segments, but after introducing a guest, they at least talk to them and ask them a few questions. But for the majority of it, it seemed like he was on stage rather than being interacted or engaged into any conversation. And for number 8, we have Blast from the Past. In one episode, Drew's interviewing Dakota Johnson and brings up the viral interview she had with Ellen DeGeneres. If you don't know what I'm talking about, back in 2019, Dakota was on the Ellen Show and was wished a happy belated birthday before insinuating she didn't get an invite. But Dakota was quick to defend herself and told her that was not the truth because she did make sure she invited Ellen after she made a big deal about not being invited to her party a year prior. And fans love that Dakota snapped back, especially after Ellen was exposed for not being the nice person she portrays herself to be online. Well, the topic first came up after they were talking about their neighbors, and Dakota revealed she was once neighbors with the late night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel, but they never invited her to any of their parties. And Drew responded to this by saying, "Is this for real? Because you know people have gotten in trouble for claiming not to be invited to your parties," which Dakota then gasped, but then bursted out laughing before adding that was amazing. For number 7, we have Drew Barrymore herself. Sometimes the host is left feeling more uncomfortable than the guest because back in 2022, Drew struggled to finish her interview because of the guest she had on. She had Lucien Labiscount, who is best known for his role in Emily in Paris, as a guest along with the other cast members of the show. The topic of childhood crushes came up and Drew admitted hers was Darth Vader. But if he was unavailable, her second choice would be the Stormtroopers. While she was discussing this with the cast, Lucien was actually backstage getting all dressed up, but not in your typical tuxedo and tie, but in some Darth Vader costumes. He came out during the second part of the interview and told Drew, "I'll be your Darth Vader by the way, whenever you need," where she was at a loss of words. Drew asked Lucien more questions about his childhood fantasy, which he responded with how he's living it right now. Drew covered her face and admitted this never happened to her before as she struggled to continue her own show. It was a funny, awkward interaction and definitely got many laughing. And for number 6, we have too much Drew. On an episode where she is interviewing the Friends star Jennifer Aniston, many criticized Drew because it seemed like Jennifer was the one doing more of the interview. Jennifer is seen asking more questions, whereas Drew was described by a Reddit user as someone who can only talk about herself. During the segment, the two ladies take a tour to places in LA where Drew has either lived in or has visited before, and this caused a lot of viewers to express their opinions online, with one even describing her as a self-absorbed and delusional before adding this episode made them uncomfortable. But others thought those criticizing this interview were just making something out of nothing. What do you think? And for number 5, we have walking off the stage. During an interview with Julia Fox, she was getting her makeup done by the model while the two were having a conversation. But once Julia mentions her program, Drew stands up and ran right off the stage and left Julia confused. And with Julia all alone on stage with a live audience watching, she says, "Oh wait, where is she going? Is this normal? Does she always do this?" before laughing and addressing the audience as she says, "So anyway, welcome to my segment, I'm taking over for her." It wasn't until after the commercial break where Drew finally returned and she was wearing Julia's fashion line and some of her signature accessories, which Julia complimented her on. Honestly, a little awkward, but I think her showing up in a whole other wardrobe kinda makes up for it. And for number 4, we have too comfy. Just like the Oprah incident we addressed earlier, Drew has been criticized for being too touchy with other guests as well. Some described it as extensive hugging, too touchy-feely, plus even more sharing and asking for a bit too much TMI. During an interview with Pamela Anderson, many viewers mentioned how Drew was sitting close, facing Pamela while leaning forwards, whereas Pamela was leaning backwards and angled away from the host, which many believed could have been an indicator that she wanted more space. Although many criticized Drew for the lack of space she gives her guests, she actually defends herself when appearing on Jimmy Fallon's show by saying she's simply just allowing her guests to feel comfortable and bring good energy to the room. And for our number 3, we have reuniting with an ex. Imagine getting into a divorce with a partner and then reuniting with them after 2 decades on television and a live audience. Because that is exactly what Drew and actor and comedian Tom Green did. It all began back when Drew, who was a fan of Tom's show, invited him to join her for the film Charlie's Angels. Although he initially declined, he ended up playing a role in the film as well, and the two began dating on set. After around a year of dating, they got engaged and tied the knot in 2001. But after 6 months of marriage, the two ended up parting ways in 2002, and after the divorce, they actually haven't seen each other since. And in a 2021 episode of the talk show, Drew introduced him to the audience and even added how she hasn't seen her ex face to face in almost 20 years. This interaction could have gone really horribly, but it went quite well. Tom even said during the show that their reunion felt like an out-of-body experience. Just a year before this interview, the two finally talked to each other after 15 long years without any communication, but it was through a video call due to the pandemic at the time. But the two turned a potentially very uncomfortable reunion into a positive, happy one, and many viewers loved this. And for our number 2, we have the WGA Strike. Drew got herself into some controversy this year after she announced her talk show would still proceed even though there was an ongoing WGA strike. Many of the public, including previous fans and even other celebrities, shared their opinions on Drew's original decision to bring back her show, and many weren't so happy. In fact, she got so much backlash that they ended up pushing back the date, but before it returned, 3 of the show's head writers actually decided to leave due to the mishandling of the strike. These writers were apparently sent another offer to return to the show, but they all declined. What made things worse was once the show did end up coming back, Drew didn't mention anything about the strike, and many who watched this episode shared their opinions with Variety, and many were disappointed in Barrymore. And for our number 1 spot, we have Paris Hilton. During a 2020 appearance Paris did on Drew's show, she discussed very personal things that shaped her life, such as her past traumas, but some in the comments described how this interview was uncomfortable because some believed Drew was trying to seek validation. And this interview with Paris was meant to allow her to share her past experiences after she revealed some of the horrific past in her YouTube documentary. The interview starts with Drew mentioning it's hard to connect to interviewers as someone who's being interviewed because they often don't go through the same experiences. But Drew let Paris know in this scenario, she will be able to completely understand Paris because she has gone through solitary confinement too, and described how it saved her life before asking how it was for Paris. And she responded by saying it gave her trust issues and even post-traumatic stress disorder. The interview felt a little awkward as Drew would mention again how Paris's experience is just like if she looked into the mirror because they are so similar, and it seems like majority of the interview was about how Drew has also gone through past experiences and even asked Paris if she agrees with her instead of asking questions to her. Many shared their thoughts on this interview, with 1 writing, Paris handled this interview so well, with another viewer writing, Drew is making it all about herself and subtly downplaying what Paris went through. That's what makes it awkward. If you watch this interview or a clip of it, let me know what your thoughts are, because I see comments also defending Drew by saying this interview was not awkward at all. Comment below your thoughts. Well, we have made it to the end of today's video. Are you a fan of Drew Barrymore's talk show, or are you a fan of her in movies? I would love to hear all your opinions below, and if you made it this far, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.